Professor Moellendorf, you mentioned briefly the divestment movement. I'm just wondering if you all can say a little more about the efficacy of such a movement, especially given in this country our government's inaction.
I was a student in the 80s, and I was involved in a divestment movement that existed in the 80s, and it was an attempt to try to get institutions to divest their portfolios from holdings in South Africa. I think there was some success, at least insofar as it was part of a broader international effort to try to isolate the South African government. That effort was eventually successful, and I think that what's important about the divestment movement that is occurring on campuses, it's also occurring in churches and in other arenas, is that it allows us to focus on the problem of the reserves of oil and coal that exist in the earth that simply can't be tapped. There are vast reserves of oil and coal, and companies have very strong business interests in seeing these reserves be tapped. And of course, they will use their political power to ensure that those interests are, or to, as best as they're able to ensure that those interests are actually realized. And the only way that, that I see that can be resisted is if people decide to exert pressure of their own, and one way to exert that pressure is to make the cost of doing that sort of business a lot less attractive, and that's the importance, I think, of the divestment movement. You're right; it hasn't produced the results yet, but it's early days, yeah. And you should continue to do it. Those of you who are doing it, and I applaud your efforts.
And I think the divestment campaign also moved towards getting to a really actionable symbol of something that people can do. One of the things I've been disappointed by in the political rhetoric in the United States is this war on coal rhetoric. I think the war on coal should be embraced. I think coal should be framed for what it is, a nasty, destructive substance that should be left in the earth, that despoils landscapes when it's mined, that pollutes the air even when we're not talking about climate change, and that kills people in mines. And I think divestment, particularly focusing on coal, actually then begins to create what might be an actionable symbol for acting on climate change.
Just a footnote, probably most of you know the statistic, but if you look at the carbon budget, how much more carbon we can put in the atmosphere and not have the temperature go up more than 2 degrees, and then calculate the amount of carbon that's in the proven reserves, not the possible proven ones, there are 5 times as many proven reserves as we can possibly burn. So 80% of what we already know about mustn't be used. This is why I keep saying it's idiotic to be subsidizing further exploration. We don't need to find another lump of coal, much too much coal,